marathon. I'll give you the gospel of St. John. It's been not the wake up cause we both know that his mercy flows in the morning. Welcome to a brand new day.
Couch, smoking cigarettes. When I walk in the door, I've had another long day. My feet are sore, but I gotta pay the rent. Cause you damn sure ain't been blessed with a paying job today. You just sit there in your selfish way, as if I was a nobody, baby. Nobody, baby. Stop looking right through me. Take a look at the new me. This is somebody, baby. You're lying in our bed, watching reality TV. When I walk in the door, I'm ready for some love and more. Sipping very close to you. I can't believe you'd rather watch the tube than make sweet love to me. Do I only exist in your dreams? As if I was a nobody, baby. Just a nobody, baby. Stop looking right through me. Take a look at the new me. This is somebody, baby. The house is empty tonight, and the cloud of smoke has cleared. Cause I've changed the locks on every door. I won't be invisible anymore. As if I was a nobody, baby. Just a nobody, baby. Stop looking right through me. Take a look at the new me. Cause I'm somebody, baby. Baby.
There you go. All right.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to another edition of JoCo Vibes here on JoCo Community Radio. I'm Tiffany, Carlen with, I was going to say Nona Reed. Nona's here in spirit, but
Yes.
she's got a new grandbaby, so she's home. So Diana
It's
Roberts
exciting.
is with me this morning.
Yes. Hello.
And
good morning.
We've got a couple of cool guests that you guys are going to start seeing and hearing over the radio quite often, twice a week, starting this Thursday. right? We starting this Thursday?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Oh, he's not unmuted.
There we go. My bad. I'm so sorry.
There we go.
Yes,
How about now? All right.
Thursday we're getting started.
Jake Wernett and Mick
Hi.
are joining us here at the table this morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Jake is probably a familiar name and a familiar face if you're watching us on any of our social, because Jake recently ran for city council here in Burleson. And let me tell you, for a gentleman who's, you are young. I mean, you're not.
I'll be 21 this August.
Yeah, you're younger than me. I'm just going to go with that. Okay. For a young guy who people really didn't know, I mean, you pulled out the votes.
We got about, I did the math, it was about roughly 30% of both counties by county wide for this past election. So we got out of a good 2,300 and something votes, we got about 735.
That's
awesome.
I mean, for a young guy,
Yeah.
who a lot of people don't know, running against a gentleman who has been in Burleson, I don't know, 40, 50 years, something like that.
Roughly 5 decades.
Yeah, I'm not sure if if he was born and raised here or not, but he's a former head of athletics director for BISD, and I mean, people really knew who he was. So for you to run against him and to pull the votes out that you did against him was absolutely amazing.
It was a large blessing on God's part too, that we had the votes that we did, and Mick was out there helping me on the campaign trail. He was managing what he could for me. I really give credit to the people of our community for that, is that they are willing, and it shows that 30% of our community was willing to entrust a young person with an elected seat in their government. And that was really something special, was for the youngest person in city council history, for me to run and get 30% of the vote was a big deal. And not a lot of people are going to pay attention to that in 100 years. But when more young people start getting involved, that's when it's really going to
this is one of the conversations that you and I have had. And when you came to me about having a show, which we're going to talk more detail in here in just a minute, when we started to talk about it, I mean, and the first time I met you, actually, when we interviewed you on here when you were running, that's what kind of sparked me right away, is we need more of our youth in our community involved in what's going on in local government, what's going on with politics, what's going on with our school districts, and then to also have an understanding of how that affects what's going on at the state level, the county level, and beyond that. And so I mean, everything begins with grassroots. And so I'm super excited because you're going to bring a whole another generation of listeners to our radio station, and you're going to be educating. And we've talked about this too, and I say this all the time, everything begins with education. Absolutely everything begins with education. And so whether you're in agreement with someone or you're in opposition of someone, it's still getting an education on what the other person is thinking. And so welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard. And
it's so much fun.
I want you to tell the listeners what it is that you're going to school for. And when you ran for city council, I think this is the part too where you have some, and again, I think it's part of a lost generation that look down their nose at the younger generation and think, well, he can't possibly be a city councilman. And when I met you and listened to you speak and then learned what you were going to school for, I was like, why not?
Yeah, I felt the same.
Well,
I was like, this kid could do it.
He's
not
more,
that you're a kid. Sorry, young man.
Yeah.
My bad.
He's more educated in government and politics than his opposition was, to be honest. And so age does not necessarily mean smarter,
right?
And a better choice. And so tell everybody, what are you going to school for?
So I'm studying a bachelor's of science at the University of Texas at Arlington for political science and public policy and administration. and double minoring in German language and military history.
See, I didn't even throw that
Oh.
out to you. So
Du kannst
she grew up-
Deutsch sprechen.
she grew up in Germany, so
Yes,
this is
I can speak German.
it's a good person you can actually practice with. So what are your goals, your future goals? And we're talking way down the road, or hey, it may be sooner than that.
Well, I'd like to get involved in legislature, and school is really pushing all of us young people towards law school, and I feel like that is anymore it's a lost art. I feel like law is something that anybody can go to school for and anybody can get into office and do, but it takes real gumption to get in right off the bat and say, well, my mentality is if you have better laws to begin with, then no common man is going to have to go pay 50 grand a year to go get a lawyer to fight on their behalf. If we
Kinda
have
like that. I'm sorry.
better laws to begin with, then our state and our citizens are not being taken advantage of.
Oh, totally. Completely agree with that. I'm just married to an attorney, so maybe like cringe a little bit, like, ooh, if he's listening, I'm not sure what he's going to think about that, Jake.
And it's nothing against
No, we talked about
people
this
with law
already.
degrees, but it's like if you have a lot of attorneys, you basically have a lot of supply of possible judges to pick from, but you don't have a lot of legislators to pick from. Somebody that understands the current law is not going to have an open theoretical mindset to what laws are possible to implement or which ones to take out, because all that you're used to is defending the status quo.
Yeah.
And that's really what
Very true.
I took from school, was that you have professors telling you, well, universal health care, universal basic income are not so bad. And you really have this idea that communism is seeping in through the schools. And the only reason that it's continuing the way it is because our youth do not have an open mindset to what can we change about the status quo rather than defending it.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, same.
It's a really good outlook. So tell everybody the name of your new show.
So our new show is going to be called Let Freedom Ring, The Great American Discussion. We were sitting there, they're coming up with this, and remember we had a bunch of stuff on the board, and all of a sudden this song came to mind from the two 1830 songs about patriotism, and I just took the three words "Let Freedom Ring," and it sounded nice, but I think it's kind of an imperative title that we have something that matches what our outlook of the future should be. People will tell you, what you can and can't eat anymore. People will tell you what you can and can't say, what you can do at school, what you can study, what you can read. And I really don't think that matches the symbolism of this country anymore.
Cancel culture.
Exactly.
Cancel culture. If they don't like what you're saying, you're just not really here, and it's not real. What you're
Mhm.
saying isn't real. It can't possibly be true. And so I completely agree with that. And of course, when we were whiteboarding and mind dumping to come up with exactly what meant something to you, it was Martina McBride's song that I couldn't get out of my head. Let it freedom ring. And so I was like, that's it. It's Martina. But you really went back to history to pull from, and I appreciated that. And I know that everybody else is. But tell me about how did this partnership come about with Mick?
So Mick and I, we started in high school. We go way back about 5 or 6 years to
I couldn't get rid of him.
my sophomore year. It was your junior year, and
Yeah.
we were sitting in our first class we ever had together was Mr. LaValle's class with high school chemistry. And we're sitting there, and we've got another friend, Brandon, who's in the Air Force over at Maryland right now.
Let's go, Brandon.
The
I just want to get that out there.
the three of us were
Too
sitting in
soon?
class, and
Let's use it.
you can't see it, but we were a bunch of troublemakers. We'd be sitting there discussing politics and stuff in class, and we'd always get in trouble for discussing it. But we were like, we can't do that. We have a one-track mind, one thing at a time, And so long after that, we've been through some stuff. We've gone through some stuff together, but we've pulled through and had a pretty good relationship.
Okay, ignore us. We're engineering over here.
Cool, please.
And so now you're not going to be available all the time, is that right?
No.
So he's going to be your co-host.
Nice little sidekick.
Well,
sidekick, yeah.
I wouldn't call it that.
And honestly, he can be on from anywhere. We talked about this. So
Yeah.
um
Sean's got and I had told you this, that Sean is actually going on a tour with Yale. So Mick won't be around much for the beginning of August, but he'll be back after, what is it, a few weeks?
Yeah, a few weeks. I'll be in Chicago. I think I just got confirmed the Yale trip, and I think Harvard after that.
Fantastic. Okay,
Nice.
so are you touring to possibly go to law
Mm.
school at one of these two schools?
I am.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm really
Nice.
excited for you. Like, do you have a preference?
Not really.
No,
I'm the first person in my family to go to a college here in the States. So,
in the
Yeah.
States.
Mm.
Okay, explain that. So you have family who went
uh,
overseas.
my family came to America recently, we'll say. I'm second or third generation, depending which side you measure it from.
Oh, really?
So,
Fascinating.
Awesome.
And where from?
Northern Ireland mostly. I had a great grandmother from Germany.
Oh, I love it.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it.
Me and German culture, like we get along very well.
So talk to me, Jake, about this Thursday.
So this
What are you going to be discussing your first show?
this Thursday, we figured out, we're not going to have a whole week. We're going to kind of toss up a mix. So Mick and I are going to be discussing science fiction and politics. So how our government currently is shaped by the reality that science fiction had written about years ago and centuries ago. So we're going to be going through Orwell. We'll be going through Kurt Vonnegut. I just read a novel recently. It's called Player Piano. So I don't know if anybody's read it, but Kurt Vonnegut talks about socialism seeping into the country through the State Department, and mostly coming in through the economy. So Vonnegut writes that people will ultimately, quote unquote, be liberated from the strife of daily work. But in reality, all people end up doing all day is watching TV. And so I think the pressing matter is what Mick and I want to discuss is which author was more right about where we are currently. Are we seeing a dystopia created by Orwell, or are we seeing one written by Vonnegut, or are we seeing one by Aldous Huxley? So we're going to be going into the theoreticals of science fiction, showing how it kind of plays into political reality. And then next week, when we actually get our first 2 days up on the week, we're going to be discussing the new movie out that's called Sound of Freedom. So we're going to be discussing the issue of human trafficking. And then Thursday, we'll be discussing with former educators about how this child perverse culture has seeped into the schools.
Mm.
So we'll be discussing the ways that the schools are now indoctrinating children to be all right with child trafficking.
This is absolutely important information
Yes.
to come out. We have quite a few shows that have we've had very in-depth conversations about trafficking actually, and know some survivors who have been pulled out of it. And then there's if you're not familiar with what it is, most people think that trafficking happens with strangers,
Mhm.
and that's actually not where it begins. It typically begins with someone a child knows, or not even a child, but an adult. It's a boyfriend, it's a friend, it's even a parent. And one of the survivors that had joined one of our past shows, anonymously, obviously, because their case was still pending. It was the mother who first trafficked her own child.
Oh,
And so this is
Mm-mm.
happening in our nation, and people don't want to discuss it. They think, oh, this is only happening in third world countries. No, this is happening here. But we should care that it's going on in other countries as well. But you have to wake up and open your eyes to see it's happening here.
Absolutely.
It's happening here. And way more often. That's me. I didn't mute. Way more often than people realize. So I appreciate that you're going to address that and address how it's being introduced into our schools. So Greg Cooper has a show on Mondays at 5 p.m. called The Breakdown. And he had Godly ISD board member on yesterday. And that was one thing that they were actually talking about was some of what's going on in the Godly ISD and how they're introducing it. And just 2 clicks away from the Godly ISD website is a website called Trevor. About Trevor. Is it about Trevor?
I would say it's
.org.
about Trevor.
I think it's about Trevor.org, I think is what it is.
I think so.
And basically what it is it's giving an outlet to our children without parental consent. We're talking about our minor children to have the freedoms of their own to explore their questioning, their sexuality. These are and that should never be linked in any disguised way from a school district to give that to our kids. What should be there is
fundamental arithmetic, reading, writing.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it's
You're there to learn.
if you have a child that comes to you, I mean, I learned some very disturbing things that have gone on in an ISD, and I can't talk about them right now, but I mean, I heard some very disturbing things, cover-ups and things that are being kept from parents and taxpayers, and it's all going to come out. But the point is
Good, it
that
should.
if there's a conversation that happens that takes place in school with a child, whether a child's questioning their sexuality or anything, that next phone call or next discussion should be, here's a guide that we can help you talk to your parents about what you're going through, and then you pick up the phone and you call the parents, and it should end right there.
Absolutely.
Not
It's
like,
not
hey,
the school's job to, figure out a child's, like, there are counselors. I understand that, but that's a different situation. If you have counselors that are on, and the child is actually going through emotional, whatever, I mean, that's understandable, but not to get that involved.
It's not a school counselor does not have a right to keep information from a parent.
Oh, no, not at all.
No.
Yeah, no.
And
no.
that's actually what's happening. So they're
okay.
they're keeping this from the parents. They're not calling up the parents. I learned of a suicide threat that was never reported to parents.
What?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh
Yep.
my gosh.
And
that is crazy.
And I think, deep down,
That's
and I
not
know
good.
that you're going to get into this over the weeks to come and the months to come, is why, right?
Yeah.
That's where you're going to be talking about this trafficking and how our children are starting to be groomed from our public schools. And the question is why? Why? How? Where is it beginning? I'm hoping you're going to dive deep into TASB and how they're involved in our school districts. And man, I just learned about. I just can't talk about too much right now, but just some stuff that I learned about.
I will go ahead and recommend a book. I don't know if anybody out there has heard of Tal Brook. Tal Brook wrote a few books about biblical prophecy and about the current state of affairs in government. He wrote a book called One World, which originally the title, I think, was When the World Will Be as One. Basically the globalist agenda. And so there's a whole chapter discussing the pragmatics of education and how sexuality will be brought into the school system and how it will be brought in under the guise of personal freedom, educational freedom, freedom of expression. And it's very, very important to consider the book because it was written in 2001 or 2002, I believe.
2000. It was written in 2000. I've got it in front of me.
And so the book, to hear this 23 years back almost is, and I was talking to my dad about this morning. It's not that it's a prophetic message. This is what is to come. This is what will come if we allow it to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And no, you go ahead, sir.
The shocking speed at which this has happened. I was born in 2001, just for context. Jacob, you were 2003?
2002.
2002. And this didn't exist until, my junior year of high school when it first started coming out. In the span of 6 years, it's taken over completely.
Wow.
And that's shocking.
So as a student, I mean, you're currently a student, not a high school student, but going through that 6 years, what was it that jumped out at you in regard to seeing, watching this happen right in front of your eyes? Because most children, while they're going through it, aren't seeing it, but you saw it. So what was it that jumped out?
Well, I have to say, I generally don't pay attention to politics. I pay attention to things like abortion or tax cuts, things like that. But everywhere I was going, people were talking about this. It was on my YouTube feed, and I don't watch political channels.
Right.
And that just showed me how, oh, Jesus, this is everywhere now. It's not just Texas, not just California, you know, the two big states. It's New York, definitely. It's Florida, everywhere. And even in Europe, it's just spreading like a mind virus.
Mm.
And that showed me, even though I don't care, it's right in front of me. I have to care.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Mick and I have, you know, we've had debates over the years since we started high school together. He's more of a realist than I am. I'm more of a metaphysical theorist. And by that, I mean, you know, it's not necessarily that I don't pay attention to what's happening in reality, but you have to look at the fundamentals of why things are happening, how they are happening, and how they have been allowed to happen. And so, you know, I told Mick a few years back I believe this is happening because the school system is taking advantage of two things. They're taking advantage of the idea of the age old quote, "This is what I want to be when I grow up." And so now schools, rather than teaching to fundamental curriculum, math, reading, writing, basic science, biology, we are teaching to a curriculum that instead of I want to be a fireman, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a professor when I grow up, it's I want to be XYZ. And it has nothing to do with the idea of careers anymore. It's sexuality and propaganda.
Hold that thought. We're going to go to a quick break and we'll be back with Jake and Mick.
Are you messing with it?
Abnormal reality.
My mom.
Yep, she sent me a message.
My mom did?
Yeah, Wednesday night, and she invited me over tomorrow night to watch Titanic and share a bowl of popcorn, and I accepted.
You did?
Yep.
That'd be fun.
And she calls it Chaps Only Night every Saturday night.
Look,
Miss Dixie,
Look,
how you doing? He said, "It's my mom, bro. All right, it's my mom."
I want to hear the answer to the Titanic and popcorn. Go ahead, Mom. What's up?
Oh!
Hi, boys.
Hi,
I just
Mom.
wanted to ask Rocky if he wanted butter on that popcorn or not.
I
my
would rather
God.
have the butter somewhere else, but if popcorn's the only place I can have it, I'll take it.
Jeez,
Hey,
dude.
nobody says I can't roll around in it for a little bit.
All right, Mom.
That is my
Love you.
girl. I love you,
Mom.
Dixie.
Abnormal reality
Bye, Mom. Love you.
Dixie.
Bye. I love you too.
with Ron and Rocky. Weekdays, 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. on JoCo Community Radio.
Holy crap.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the
Is it
stress and
HP?
get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your
We have
student
been
loans out of
censored.
default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection
Bill
calls,
Gates
and
is sitting at
stop
his house
seizure of your
like-
tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
JoCo Community Radio. Listen live at tunein.com.
Trevor Project. Are we all on music?
I believe so.
It's my one ear that's not working.
Oh. All right, guys. So welcome back to JoCo Vibes with Tiffany and Diana, and we've got our awesome special guests with us, Jake and Mick. JoCo Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio Network. TuneInJoCo.com is the place to find all the ways to listen and watch, and the station app is also available for free on Android and Apple devices. Simply search your store. Check out our lineup and more at JoCoCommunityRadio.com. This episode and more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your Texas sales rep at 844-839-4245. Again, that's 844-839-4245. Also, be sure to dress your arms and more at thetiffy.com. All right.
No, really not. Muted.
No. Okay.
There we go.
I don't know why I hit the button and it like doesn't like my finger or something. I'm
I
not
don't
hitting it right.
know.
I'm not
Good
hitting it hard enough.
morning.
I'm
It's a balmy 85 degrees and feels like let's see, heat index of boys have to excuse me for a moment. A heat of sweat your balls off. That's the index today. So
I agree.
I concur.
I'm over this lovely August and June weather we're having. So just a couple of comments, but Greg Cooper says Jake is a rock star in the making.
Yes.
And
I agree.
Thank you, Greg.
Angelo Roca says Kurt Vonnegut is one of the greatest writers of all time. And so, I mean, there's a lot of good to come from your show. And so, I mean, where are you going to be on the opposing opinion side of things? Are you going to listen to those? Are you going to bring those people on? I mean, how do you want to have some of that conversation? Oh, you are opposing? Are you opposing on some of his views?
I'm a Kennedy Democrat.
Okay.
Really left in a lot of things.
Really?
Oh.
This is unexpected. You did not tell me this, Jake. That's a cool surprise. I like it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there are some things that Mick and I don't agree on at all. There are some things that we agree too much together on.
Okay.
We are going to make this as nonpartisan as can be. Now, I'm going to say ahead of time that some of my bias or Mick's bias might slip in a little bit, but there is nothing that brings our country together like a good discussion.
Absolutely.
And we started at the dinner table and then it moved to the Capitol building. So you have discussion at every level. Why not engage everybody? So our goal is going to be as conservative as possible with our values and our morals, but we're going to be as open as possible as we can to discussing things with everybody. So, we might bring on the chairman of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party for both counties in one sitting and get there and kind of prod at them a little bit. It's very interesting to see how alike people can be on things. And it's not even a political issue. It's just a moral, a viable option for people that we can come together and compromise on some things without losing our values, without losing our sense of direction.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I do too. Because I mean, that's where we learn from each other, right? If we're not learning from each other, what are we doing?
Well, I mean,
and where are we going, right?
Well, if we
have
all
to be able to hear both sides.
If we all thought the same way, it would be robotic.
Yeah.
And we weren't meant to think the same way. It's not how God designed us. I mean, we're meant to get to where we want to go or communicate what we want to communicate in each of our own ways. And the greatest thing about that is learning how to do it respectfully, honestly, with integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look forward to this even more because you're friends, and I have some opposing opinions with several of my friends as well. And there's been occasion where, we've really had it out, when I first met Mayor Fletcher, in fact, we had some pretty deep opposing views on a few things. And the great thing about him and what I respect about him is that he was willing to hear me and hear my why and accept it. Right. You don't have to agree with someone on a political issue or on any issue whatsoever. You just simply have to be respectful about someone else's opinion. And hopefully on both sides, you're capable of walking away and going, okay, that was a little bit of food for thought for me. And, I can look at his or her view from their perspective and see if there's anything I can learn from it. So, that excites me. I like that because it's important to hear. It's important to hear when people don't agree and why. And so, I think that's going to make it a little more fun and educational, to be honest.
And there's a lot of stuff that Mick knows about that, just is beyond me. I took a few of the same classes he did when he was going through his real estate program. And there is so much legality that goes into it.
Yes, there is.
So many laws that you have to memorize. And brings a sense of respect that there are people that are going through this course and learning the material that, somebody else is like, well, I understand law, I understand government, but when you sit down at a government standpoint, it's free property or no property. There is one side or the other, or you have a very gray area in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of laws that go into that free property or no property that people just don't understand. I don't know if you want to talk about your experience or the things that you've studied, but
not yet. Nick's like, no, I
He's
don't.
like, I'm waiting for our show.
no, I don't. I'm going to save it for radio. Yeah. So I got that. All right. So I'm going to segue into something really quick that we do our first week of JoCo, our first show of the week for JoCo Vibes. And this is called the focus word of the week.
Mm-hmm.
You must focus. I feel like we did this
It's on a
already.
daily.
Yeah. I feel like
we did all of them. Remember, we're doing it all over again.
I know that, but I feel like we just did this one last week. But all right, this is where I'm going because I'm turning the page. This is what comes up next.
Okay.
All right, our focus word of the week is. Hang on, gotta get the peepers on.
Oh my goodness,
my old lady eyes. Okay, the focus word of the week is forgiveness. Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. That's Proverbs 19:11. And the focus tip for this week is, as you focus on forgiveness this week, search your heart for any past hurts you are still holding on to and let go of them. Lean on God to help you. Also this week, when you feel yourself starting to hold on to feelings of resentment, focus on the word forgiveness, recite the activating scriptures, and don't allow the roadblock of offense on your driveway. So forgiveness is not lack of forgiveness is a roadblock. And that's totally true.
Yeah, it is.
And not for the person that you're forgiving or the scenario that you're forgiving. It's a roadblock for yourself. So
absolutely.
I like that. So forgiveness, focus word of the week is forgiveness. I like it. And that goes down to with forgiving yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, dang, was that for me?
Yeah. feel free to comment, join in. Yeah. So, all right. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because we're talking and I feel like we're going to get on about ourselves and it's going to roll.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to roll right through.
Absolutely.
So, what do you think is, or what do you believe is the greatest thing that you want people to take away each week from your show?
I don't know if you have an opposing one. I want it to be that there is more than meets the eye.
Yeah.
There is a status quo that is the way it is because somebody wants it to be, and it is not always the American public.
Right.
There have been controversies all the way back to colonial times that our government has taken advantage of public crises, public knowledge, and instituted principles that go against the American way of life. And otherwise, people are not going to pay attention. I think it was George Orwell that had this quote. He said, if you give the public bread and circuses, he said, they'll never see what's, behind the curtain. And I'm paraphrasing that. But for instance, one thing that I had read about that I would have never known was when this whole UFO stuff actually started. And me and Mick might even do a segment on this for an entire week. But when the UFO stuff really started, it was Senator Harry Reid that started the first committee for it in the United States Senate. And they had actually gotten a boost in defense spending for it. I think it was around $130 something million. Well, who got the majority of that money? Then an aerospace defense firm contractor who was lifelong friends with Senator Harry Reid, who was based in his district in Nevada, and got all that money. And all of a sudden overnight, nobody has seen the documents about what came out of that spending, where Bigelow Aircraft Industry spent the money, what happened to it. So are we really seeing public crises come in and fear at work because, it's really happening? Because I haven't seen anything flying outside in the last year. Or is it just a guise to get more money, create this whole schematic of, we're really out to get people's money, or we're out to strike fear into people to get a rise out of them.
Right.
And that's really the state that our country's in everywhere with
Hello, COVID.
gender, with COVID, with public health, with the right to say what you want and write what you want. Are we really a free country, or are we just one onslaught of fear after another?
That's a great point.
That is a very good point.
That's and it is ongoing, and
It is.
and it's it did start way back. But how do you control people? And you control people with propaganda and fear. I mean,
Absolutely.
look at Hitler. It's exactly what he did. He created a fear that shouldn't even have existed.
No.
And then he used propaganda to take control of the people and create fear. So it was either get on board or death.
Yeah.
And that's how he did it. I mean, that's how he took over and created the disaster that he created. He was a monster. He was an absolute monster. It's the same thing that we see in Russia. They're living under a guise of fear as well. And slowly but surely it creeps in here in their United States. The only thing that I see difference at my age is that the American people are very strong, and that can be a good thing and also a bad thing. But the American people do respect and hold dear to themselves freedom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Completely. And so I don't know. Have you ever watched Handmaid's Tale?
I have not.
Need to watch it.
Surprisingly.
You need to watch it. And the reason I say you need to watch it is because these are the types of things that, I mean, literally, some of the legislation that is trying to be passed right now falls in line with something like The Handmaid's Tale, trying to dictate who is good, who is bad, and let us control your faith. Let's control your sexuality, and right where it seems like an almost opposing thing, but it's really not, because it can go either way.
Your money,
whose status is what, and I don't know if you know the premise for the show. I'll just kind of give you the small premise, and then you need to just kind of go. You got to get through that first episode, because it's kind of slow.
Yeah.
But you need to get through it to understand what they're doing, and it all comes down to really trafficking. They're trafficking their own women, their own people, to their hierarchy only, and they become handmaids. And the way they become handmaids is the government was watching them and saw that they had this transgression and they committed this sin and they did this, and so they would take them, capture them, and basically imprison them as handmaids to have babies for these hierarchy men. And
that's crazy,
right?
I heard
It's
the
insanity.
expression once.
You've been
that
telling me I need to watch this.
If it's in a film or a book, it's probably being done.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the part,
so.
like the more this, like my husband and I watch it, and the more the seasons that you get into, you're like, holy cow, this could happen.
It's like
this
The
could
Simpsons.
seriously happen.
Have you heard about The Simpsons? Like, so many of the previous episodes were things that actually came to life years later.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, what?
Trump
it's like
becoming president.
Yes,
Yep.
like all those things. Like they were putting those little innuendos in there, letting us know what was going to be coming, what was happening.
Well,
See, and that's it's real hard too, especially now with what y'all said about the whole fear thing. It can be good or bad. I believe if somebody has the fear of God, they don't need to fear the enemy.
Absolutely.
The beginning of knowledge comes with a healthy fear of the Almighty.
Absolutely.
And anybody who fears the enemy it only fears the enemy because they don't have a firm knowledge of how the enemy works.
Mm-hmm.
You take a look back at the campaigns that America did. This is the Red Menace. You had the posters up all over town. But I started getting into a book by J. Edgar Hoover, who was FBI director for nearly 50 years, and then a separate book by the subcommittee number 5 on international troop movements by the House of Representatives. And both of the books were on the topic of communism, and they both show exactly in black and white quotes by Vladimir Lenin himself. He even calls the Democratic Party sham socialists and all of these things. And it really opens up your eyes to how much of this has been idealized by the people who are in charge, the people who are creating these crises to get something out of it. And I'm not saying that the world is nothing but a giant conspiracy, but one thing about politics is people are always looking out for their own interests.
Right.
And that's really what our show's about. Is you have these groups of people that kind of use the masses as nothing more than a pawn for votes.
Mm-hmm.
You have nothing but a Ponzi scheme that comes out of some of it, where somebody gets money and somebody else doesn't. And it's not about Republican or Democrat. That's why, Mick and I have agreed that we really want to have anybody on, is because anybody can tell a story, but it takes multiple chapters to create a book. And if we're looking at the book of this country, we want everybody to have a chapter, because every way possible, everybody interacts with anybody else. So that's really what the imperative is out of it.
It's important, as you guys are going to do, and that's why I really like about the fact that you're looking at all sides of it, is to understand that just because someone calls themselves a Democrat or someone calls themselves a Republican doesn't make them a bad person on either side. There are bad people in this world.
Oh yeah,
and there's bad people in this country who are out for power, and they're out for their own gain. That's I don't want to say it's not to say it's okay, but it's the nature of how things kind of go.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of saying that, all Democrats are this or all Republicans are this is wrong. It's a wrong way of looking at them. Those are individualistic beliefs, and the way that they do that, the majority of us are in the middle. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, and then you have your far left and your far right, and they're very loud. And so because they're smaller groups, and so it makes each group look like they're all the same, and that's not the truth. So I mean, I'm a centrist. I vote for people and the issues that are important to me, and so I've voted both ways, and I respect and have anybody. I respect anybody's outlook, but give me an educated.
Oh yeah,
give me an educated outlook. So not just someone's, your opinion. You know what I mean?
There was a young person in my English class recently, here about a year back, when I took American literature. And, this might be commonplace on college campuses, but evidently I'm not looking in the right place, or you have that one in a dozen that comes out and really gives the true colors of the propaganda that's being elicited to people. There's a young lady in my college literature class. She says, we're reading a book, Invisible Man. It was by an African-American author. I don't remember the name right off the bat. But she was discussing, black labor in the 1930s, the 1940s, when this book was written. We're discussing social reform and unions and the idea of, I don't even know how it got to liberalism and conservatism, but the young lady says, we are not going to have a progressive country unless either one of two things happens. And she says either all of the old people die off or all of the conservatives die off. And so I was sitting there, I was taken aback. I was like, there is no way that somebody has literally just made a threat on another person's life. They say this country will not succeed unless we get rid of old people or conservatives.
Oh,
and this is a book from the 1930s.
Well,
or was this the opinion?
The young lady in the class had said that in response to part of the book. And I was just sitting there taken aback. I was like, well, if you really look at a bell curve, the majority of the American people lie in the middle. They're all swing voters. They go on issue or by person. Even if they're with the same party, they're not going to vote for the same person next year that they might 4 years ago. And so to hear somebody my own age come out and say, well, we have to genocide an entire group of people in order for this country to succeed, really showed how far we had fallen since my grandparents' age.
So
can I say something? I want to interject really quick. So so how I see it, right, is, there's Republican, there's Democrat, there's conservative, there's all these different words that we label it, right? But really what it comes down to and what it boils down to is a view, right? And an opinion. It's a view and an opinion. So regardless if you're Republican, Democrat, whatever that might be, like what you're saying, we're looking and focusing on what is going on in the world and how can we better it, right? How can we make society, how can we make the people, be able to grow and actually have a place worth living, right? And waking up to every morning and being excited about being here in the United States, right? So that's really what it boils down to. It shouldn't be, oh, you're a Republican, I can only go with what Republicans are saying.
Yeah.
No, then you're missing other views and other opinions that Democrats might have that might actually make more sense than what you've got a Republican saying. So that's why for me, I feel like the labeling of the words that we're putting on it are what is causing, right, like the diversity, like the segregation, what you might call it, you know what I mean, like dividing, instead of conquering together. There's so much division.
Well, I mean, I'll take another step forward. Is that division? I mean, divide and conquer is the devil's way.
Oh, yeah.
That's how he works. So
Right.
he wants to divide us, and because we're stronger together, no matter
Absolutely.
what our views are or what our goals are, we're stronger together as a group. I had this discussion with someone yesterday evening talking about parents within different school districts within Johnson County. And I'm going to focus on Johnson County because we are JoCo Community Radio. That parents will secretly go, "Ooh, thank you. You're doing such a great job. Keep up the good work, being a voice for us. Well, join us." "Oh no, I can't. I can't do that because I don't want those that are empowered to know." Right. So it becomes a problem and a fear of retaliation and attack versus adults realizing, wait a minute, we are way stronger as a team of 40 parents or 40 households against the school district or against the city, whatever it is that you're looking to correct or empower. And so it also comes down to that too. We're all looking, I think, in those of us who are stepping up to the plate are looking to empower people and educate people to make better choices. In the case of what you're talking about with this young woman, I'm going to give you a little bit of a different view on what she may have been really trying to say. I don't necessarily think, now I wasn't there, so I don't know if there was more elaboration on exactly what she said.
So I wasn't sure myself, to be honest, what she had.
So
Right.
I'm gonna.
She didn't put it across very well.
I'm gonna quote somebody, but I'm gonna keep the person's name anonymous who said this, and there is a lot of education experience behind the person who said this. But every small town needs a few funerals, and so when you have experience in small towns across Texas, you tend to see who's holding back the growth of a community, the change in a community. And typically it's those that have been in power for a long time. They may be of the elder generation who they're comfy, right? They're comfy right where they are. They don't want any change. This is the way it's been for 40 years. We don't need to change anything. We don't need to grow. We don't need to educate ourselves or the people about new opportunities, new things that can make our community better. Or, I mean, growth is happening. Growth happens. And so with that, it's a natural thing. People die, people get born. And so I know it might sound bad. I don't know her, so I don't know if she was specifically talking about genocide, but I see where you're going. But it does become a challenge when you have people who are stuck in a mindset, and you do have generational mindsets that people get stuck in. And that's what holds back a community. It holds back our government. Look at our government. Look who's sitting at the top of our government.
Boomers.
Okay.
So,
Boomers.
yeah.
Right. And so they're sitting up there falling asleep during Senate meetings and
Getting drunk on the House floor.
Yes. And they're
literally.
and they're lifers. These people are lifers. They will stay on there until they're 95 years old or until they're dead. I mean, and that's what they are sitting there. They are dead. It's don't care.
Power. They want the power and the control. And so it's hard to give up that power and control when you have it.
I'll speak on a local level for a moment without I'll just speak on a local level. It's the same thing with people sitting on local government for 15 years plus. You have to ask yourself why. And then when you're voted out, Why would you bring that person back when the people just voted that person out? You're not doing it for the people. You're doing it for personal gain or to just make that old man feel better about himself. I don't really understand it. So, but there's a time to step down and let the younger, more youthful people step in and do what they got to do, because everybody has different ideas, especially in the generational side. I thank you guys, Jake and Mick, for both joining us. Tune in Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Central Time,
Yes, ma'am.
right here on JoCo Community Radio. Have a great day, guys. God bless.
Bye, everybody.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, JoCo Community Radio. Let's